Rider games at 8:30. So we gotta get by. Look like a bunch of losers anyway. Oh, I mean,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alyssa Karpenka, and I'm the event coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. This event is coming to you from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nations. Just to note that this event is being live streamed to our YouTube page, so please be aware of the webcam to your right. I'd also like to take this moment to encourage you to silence your phones for the duration of the event. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Don't They Kick When You Do That, Volume 2, More Stories of a Prairie Veterinarian by Dr. Gary Hoium, and published by DriverWorks, Inc. Thank you to Gary for being here tonight, and to him and Dina Driver for working with us to create this event. Gary Hoium was born and raised in the small community of Midale, midway between Weyburn and Estevan along Highway 39. He pursued a career in hockey, but turned to mixed animal veterinary practice when a future as a professional hockey player didn't turn out. He purchased a veterinary clinic in Weyburn in 1989 and worked at that clinic until retirement in 2021. He resides in Weyburn with his wife, Shelley, and enjoys spending time with their 2 adult children and spouses and their 5 grandchildren. I'll now turn things over to Gary. Please give him a warm welcome.
thank you, Alyssa, and good to be here. Welcome to everyone. I heard on the radio a talk show yesterday, I guess, and I don't recall what the topic was actually about, but it was someone achieving a result, and they said, well, I hope the juice was worth the squeeze. Well, the squeeze is you come in and sacrificing your Friday evening, the juice will be whatever I deliver here, so hopefully the juice is worth the squeeze. And so I'm glad to see you all here. And thank you for coming. I want to thank my editors. One of them was supposed to be here, but I don't see her yet, Tanner and Courtney, but maybe they'll show. Dina Driver, of course, was an editor of both my books, and DriverWorks Inc. Boston Hooten is my printer here in Saskatoon that we've used, and Creative Saskatchewan. We've had a little assistance from them. Once you get a book out, if you have any success, and thanks to McNally's for wonderful job of marketing the book here last year. There are last 2 years, I guess, book 1. So we hope we have similar success with book 2, I guess. And thank you to anyone that's purchased the book, either book 1 or book 2. And I don't think there's going to be a book 3, but then I guess I never thought there would be a book 2 either. So you never say never. Am I okay back there, Gerard? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear your hearing aid, so that must be working both ways. Good. Anyways, yeah, I was born and raised in Midale, halfway between Weyburn and Estevan. And as a youngster growing up, I guess we lived on the northern outskirts of Midale, small town, 500 people. And we always had a few cows, a few chickens, and of course pets. We had cats and one dog. I guess when we lived in town, we were when I was first born, we were out of town, so we've had a couple dogs on the farm, but and then rabbits. Those were kind of my pets, I guess, that I had. And as kids, me and my friends, or my friends and I, we were wanderers of the countryside, if you will, and hunters. And we dragged home everything from tadpoles to bullfrogs to owls. I'm sure nature didn't like us, because if we found it, we usually brought it home, and then what were we going to do with it? Anyways, that was just a habit we had, a bad habit. But by far and away, as Alyssa mentioned, I guess sports was my major interest as a kid, and I enjoyed baseball, basketball, but it was always my ambition to be a hockey player, a professional hockey player, along with about another, whatever, 20 or 30 or 40,000 kids, I suppose. And so some of us made it, and some of us didn't. I guess on the hockey front, I did play junior hockey for about 3 years, 2.5 years in Weyburn with Weyburn Red Wings. Had a cup of coffee with the New Westminster Bruins at the WHL, and you're going to have a little age on you to remember when they were part of the WHL. And then we had a short stint down with the Reno Broncos in a Southwest Hockey League, it was called. And that's another story in itself. We won't go there. So anyways, flat broke, and at the age of 20, I thought that maybe I better give up my hockey dream and get on with life and enroll at the U of S here with a new goal. And that new goal was to study medicine. And I guess that dream too got shattered. I applied 3 times. That was the maximum. So I think I ended up with 4 years at U of S at that time. I'd applied 3 times, been rejected 3 times, and after that, you're not quality enough to be there. They don't want you. You don't fit the program. So I always said, well, they were looking for peacocks, and I was a swan. So I didn't get in there, but I did let the dean. I managed to get a little visit in with him and just get it off my chest, I guess. So I felt better. I once had an uncle, and I do have an uncle in the group tonight, but it's not Uncle Rick, that told me, dreams are fine as long as you can live with disappointments. And I don't think he meant that negatively, but how many of us end up doing things that we never really fully intended to do in our lives. Anyways, I ended up with 2 disappointments: the hockey coming to an end, and then the goal of studying medicine coming to an end. Now, I lived in Sutherland. If any of you, probably all of you, kind of know where that is, I guess. My first years of U of S, and really all 8 years, I guess, I spent at the U of S. So I would walk home past the Western College of Veterinary Medicine just about every day, or ride my bike. And if you've ever gone that route, you can't help but notice there's some pretty terrible smells that come from that building. And I don't know, one day I happened to be going by and I thought, hey, that's medicine, that's surgery. Maybe I should give that a try. And I had a 4-year nothing degree in my mind, I guess a 3-year BSc with a little add-on, and that wasn't what I came for. So I put an application into the vet med college, and lo and behold, they accepted me the first year, and I guess the rest is now history. Well, that's kind of how it all came to be. Now, I graduated in 1984 and immediately went to work in a mixed practice in Weyburn. Mixed practice meaning we did small and large animal. And I ended up spending my whole career there. And as Alyssa had mentioned, I purchased the practice in 1989, was a sole owner of that practice till 2004, and then sold out to some younger, brighter, smarter, more energetic minds, I guess, and bodies, and continued on as a contract veterinarian, and then later as a salaried veterinarian until November of 2021, when I had had enough, I guess, and my body had had enough, so I formally retired. Become a real drinker too. Now, if anyone had told me 39 years ago when I graduated that I would write 2 books and be traveling around doing book events and or supper or speaking engagements, I would have thought them crazy. Last thing on my mind. But then I guess upon graduating, if anybody had predicted that I would spay my first tomcat in the first couple of years out of practice, I'd have thought them crazy too. And yes, I did spay a tomcat. Well, I tried to spay a tomcat, but it's really hard to find the parts and remove them, the parts you can't find. And we hunted for a minute or 2, and finally I just told my tech, would you look under that drape and tell me if this cat has nuts? I didn't even say testicles at that point. And she looked under there and she said, yes, he has nuts. Or he has. That's a real easy phone call to make to the owner when you do that. Anyways, book 1 is, there's a story in there on that one. So there are 3 main reasons then that I wrote my first book. And I'll go back to that before we get on to this new one. And that book is also Don't Think Ick When You Do That. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, we all remember that. It's fresh in our minds. It left us with tons of extra time at home. And what are we going to do with that time? How do you fill that time? Even the professional sports things that I enjoyed, everything was kind of on hold. So I got to thinking that somehow I got to do something with this time. And I guess it was at that point I got reminiscing a bit about all the stories that I maybe could tell or relate with clientele over the years without liable charges. And some stories I couldn't put in a book, obviously, but when I sat down and put a pen to paper just to see, the first night I had 65 stories, well, or titles for stories that I could do. After the second night, I had 125 possible stories. So I thought, you know what, I think I got enough stories. So it's a matter of sitting down to do that. And the third reason was that I just lost my sister to cancer with a roller coaster ride for 5 years. Unfortunately, many of us have to go through that with loved ones. So I was still a little grieving a little from that. That was in 2020, February, we lost her. And I thought, you know what, if I do write a book, I'm going to dedicate it to her, and we'll donate $1 from every book to the Canadian Cancer Society, just as a memory. And that's worked out okay. And it's not a lot, but you don't get rich writing books anyway. And this made me feel a little bit better that at least there's another purpose to this. I have a couple of diversions, but I think we better carry on with the topic of the night here. So, don't they kick when you do that? And you can see we really used our imagination on the two books. Well, we had these two colors, and my wife could tell you how much and how many hours that took to get to that point. And my wife was actually the photographer in the end for this, because we got to the point where I said, I am going to sell this book with a cover or without a cover. I don't care. And my publisher editor was at the time, Dina, was very well known and well respected, had suggested that, it would be really funny if we just had a picture of you with your arm up a cow and whatever. And so we thought that's how we got this. And I don't know if it took us half hour to take the picture. Anyways, and we really used our imagination. And when it came to book 2, we just used the color we didn't pick for the first one. Now, the chapters in both books, I guess, aren't really written in chronological order. And it's not a continuum of story. It's just a story about a rabbit, a story about a cat, a story about a person or two. That kind of thing. So it's what I call a chapter book. I don't know if that's the right title, but you can read a chapter, put it down, pick up, read a different chapter another night, and go from there. Have you got more chairs, Alyssa?
Yep, chairs.
That's my editor, one of my editors. She's got to sit down. She'll be up here correcting me. Yeah, thank you. Anyways, so they're randomly placed. The chapters are randomly placed in this book and both books. And that was kind of by design. Now, it's my style, and I haven't attended a lot of book readings, so I'm a little non-traditional, I guess, when it comes to book events and these readings. And sometimes my style is to, I will read a little bit, but I'll take what I like to say is I like to take the lid off the cookie jar. I'll give you a big smell of that cookie and a little bite. And if you like that cookie, you buy that cookie, okay? So it's on purpose. All right. And just so I don't forget, on book 2, book 1 was the Canadian Cancer Society. This second book I dedicated to my mother and my father. And in it, I say that I lost my mother in 1992 and she passed in 2005. And some of us have been through that life journey as well with Alzheimer's. So we're going to make a donation from every book sold to Alzheimer's Society in my mother's memory and aunt's memory. We've got several in our family now that have had to deal with that. So how did this book come to be, or how did I actually sit down and put the pen to paper? And yes, I'm old. I did put a pen to paper. If you see my typing speed, you'd know why. And that was the way I had to do it. And then eventually I did type it, but I pen to paper initially. It was later in the afternoon one day in April 2022. I stood up minutes earlier and was now wandering about in the house, getting my senior citizen kinks out from sitting so long. All blurry-eyed, I'd just finished some 4 hours of peering at my computer screen. I was rewriting and editing a couple of new vet-related stories that I had written weeks before. I had been half seriously contemplating writing a second book. Now, I was, however, anything but totally committed to the task at this point. I was pretty sure I had enough new, entertaining, true stories to fill a second book, but I wasn't sure I had the ambition, the energy, the drive required to see another book through to fruition. As I walked by our kitchen counter, I was somewhat startled when our landline phone sitting on the counter began ringing. The call display lit up, illuminating a name and a number I neither knew or recognized. I hesitated to answer it at first, but then convinced it wasn't one of those annoying, unsolicited telemarketing calls, I picked up the receiver. "Hello," I answered. A pleasant female voice on the other end responded asking, "Is this Dr. Hoium?" I confirmed that it was me, not knowing what to expect. Probably some charity looking for a donation. Then she continued, "I just wanted to call to tell you that I absolutely loved your book. I didn't want it to end. I'm sorry for calling, but I don't have a computer. I'm so glad you just put your phone number at the start of your book." I assured her that phoning me was perfectly fine. I thanked her for her kind words. They were most appreciated. "You have to write a sequel," she continued. "I can hardly wait to read more of your stories. I must tell you, as soon as I finished your book, I went right back to the store here in Regina, where I bought it, and I purchased 2 more to give to as gifts to a couple of my family members." I thanked her again for that and added that maybe I should hire her as my public relations person. We chatted for a few more minutes. How nice of her to call right out of the blue. Her genuine expression of appreciation and kind words were truly uplifting. Now, was this the call, the final push that I needed to get busy and get a full manuscript written for a second book? The timing of her call was impeccable. Could this be a sign from God? How many times do things like this happen to us during our lifetime? When would they do? Are we too quick to simply write them off as coincidence? I don't know. Anyway, I want to thank this very polite and kind woman, whom I believe was a senior by the softness and tone of her voice, but someone I didn't know from Eve, for giving me the final push and the inspiration I needed to just do it. Now, I wanted my first book to be a lot of things to readers, but mostly I wanted folks to read it, smile frequently, and laugh a lot. I also wanted it to be informative, educational, enlightening, and entertaining, even sad in a particular chapter or two. As big a challenge as it is going to be now, I'm determined that the second book will check all of these boxes upon its completion, and I'll leave you to be the judge of that. So let's get into this book a little bit here. I have confessed that I read at about a grade 2 level. You probably figured that out now after listening to me. And now I realize after having grade 2 grandchildren, I don't only read at grade 2 level, I'm below that. Anyways, you're here, and like I said, you got to get the juice. You already sacrificed the squeeze, so let's do it. This first reading then, I'm going to take you back to my university years. And I wasn't supposed to mention my dear wife, Shelley, but she happens to be in this chapter. Throughout most of my married life, 44 years now, I guess 45 now, we've got another year since I wrote this, my family, or at least my wife, Shelley, and I had a couple of cats and a couple of dogs, usually one or the other. For a few years, we had one of each. We were given our first pet, a dark greenish-gray, short-haired tabby cat that we named Mauser. Well, I was still in the veterinary college in Saskatoon. As he matured, we had him neutered. Like most other city cats, Mauser was a house cat with the freedom to wander the house at all times. Now, this was on occasion a problem. On one night while sleeping, I was awakened by the tinkling of a spoon on our arborite kitchen counter. Now, my dear wife had made a delicious looking and smelling carrot cake that evening and covered it with thick sweetened Philadelphia cream cheese icing just before we had gone to bed. My first thought was that cat had better not be on that counter. As I entered the kitchen and flipped on the light switch, there he was, his face in the glass cake dish licking the icing. Not thinking he was doing anything wrong, he looked up at me and smiled as I approached. I'm afraid my temper got the best of me at that moment. I shouldn't even confess what I did for fear you and will think less of me. But I grabbed Mauser and I partially buried his face in the cake pan. If you want carrot cake, I'll give you carrot cake, I said to him. I then marched over to the front door with him in hand, opened the door, and helicoptered him out into the big snowbank in our front yard. And at that point, my wife arrived. Seeing and assessing the goings on, she was now madder at me than she was at the cat. Oh, well, the cat lived, the cake was thrown in the garbage, and we all lived on happily together. Now, Mauser enjoyed making daily trips outside into both our front and backyards, just not in helicopter mode. Whenever he went to the door and asked to be let outside, we obliged. Every once in a while, during his outside adventures, he would cross paths with other felines wandering our neighborhood. Although most meetings were cordial, the odd one wasn't. A cat fight of some sort would break out. And often when that happens, and many of you have had cats that are outdoor cats, they end up getting a swelling around the back end or their tail head, namely because they back away from the opponent, decide to turn tail and run, but one final bite in the arse from the gap, and they end up with infection. What I do, Mauser had an occasional minor outdoor cat scrimmages, but luckily we never had to seek veterinary intervention as a result. That would have been tough on a vet student's wages. We, Shelley and I, and our 2-year-old daughter, along with Mauser, and I always wonder what our parents must have thought. Here we are, I got 4 years of Bachelor of Science degree, where I don't know what to do with it. Second year, and then we had a baby, and then I got into vet college, and we're living off my wife's stenographer job and student loans, and we sometimes wonder about our kids, what they're doing. Good Lord. Anyways, we survived it. Then we're at the time, 2-year-old daughter, along with Mauser at the time, we're living off my wife's full-time stenographer's job at the bank. I did say that, I guess, the Montreal main branch, my summer's landscaping earnings and student loans. Sorry. What I do recall during those early years involving Mauser was a lesson that my wife actually taught me about veterinary medicine and being a good veterinarian. And we've got a couple of veterinarians or people that are in the college here tonight, so listen up. A bit of homeschooling, you might say. Now, summer holidays were coming to an end, and I was about to commence my 3rd year of vet college. My first 2 years, I'd been subjected to very intense years of books. My head was gradually filling up with knowledge, most of which I thought would someday be useful, and some of which I highly doubted would be of any practical use at all. The standard broad multi-species curriculum was mandatory and purposely designed and intended to result in graduating generalists, veterinarians who had received comprehensive basic training in many species, but no specialist training in any one. Kind of the jack of all, master of none philosophy. It seemed to work for most, so if you were a veterinary student, you took everything. You were required to take and pass it all. We started back to class each fall, a couple of weeks ahead of the general university student population, and our classes always ran a couple of extra weeks in April. Time was of the essence. So much material, so many species, so little time. There were a number of things I was sadly missing in developing my competency. One major thing that I wasn't born with and hadn't yet been taught during my first 2 years, nor during my 4 previous years in the College of Arts and Sciences, was the power of observation. I was obviously still at the stage of thinking all I would need as a vet to diagnose animals was a thermometer and a stethoscope. The absolute necessity of actively employ all my major senses, touch, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. Well, maybe not all, I'll leave taste off the list. For each and every case would become critical to me becoming a competent clinician. Gary, Shelley said to me on more than one occasion over 1 week, there's something wrong with Mousy. I don't think he's feeling well. He's just not himself these days. Oh, she's just being a mother, I thought. Anyway, always worrying about nothing. Seemed okay to me. I hadn't noticed him acting any differently. Still eating, drinking, using his litter box, even making the odd short trip out into the yard. Maybe he wasn't full of pee and vinegar, but hey, wasn't that quite normal for a lazy house cat? A couple of days after her last comments to me expressing her ongoing concern regarding Mauser's health, Based solely upon her powers of observation, her concerns came to light. While standing up, then heading down our hallway, Mauser began to stagger and sway. He was definitely experiencing some difficulty. It looked like he might actually collapse on the spot. Seconds later, I heard the words no husband ever wants to hear from his wife, confirming that he was wrong. See, I told you, Mousie's sick. Sometimes we mums know things about our kids that others don't, like when they're not acting right, when they might be sick. I thought I'd best take this whole situation a whole lot more seriously. Even with my limited powers of observation, I too could now recognize Mousie wasn't right. Shelley had been right all along. I walked over and I picked him up. He felt cool to my touch. He struggled, wanting me to let him go. Maybe he had a carrot cake flashback as I picked him up. I immediately recognized how weak the effort was that he put forth. He wasn't a cat that normally enjoyed my affectionate touch. I set him down on one of the kitchen chairs to visually examine him. Looking at his head, his face, then his eyes, I immediately saw something very, very wrong. It was so pronounced that even a third-year vet student could notice it. You want the cookie, you buy the cookie. Once I did a presentation at Birch Hills last fall to the library presentation. We had a real good crowd. When I was all done, this 94-year-old grandma made her way up to me and she said, Dr. Hoium, that was a wonderful presentation, but if I may, I would like to offer you a little bit of advice. You have to slow down. I said, well, yeah, I guess so. I thought I had a lot of stuff to get through, a little nervous, but you just slow down. Anyways, she did well. We took her, I don't know if I took her advice, but I listened to it anyway. Now, my editor of this book said I had to include some of this chapter in here. I didn't originally have it in here, so the chapter is entitled Cold, Wet, and Half Naked. I hope this title doesn't get you too excited because unfortunately it pertains to me. If your imaginary visualization of me is not something you wish to have burned into your memory for life, you can always skip ahead to the next chapter. Maybe the half part will allow you to keep reading. Whenever I went on a farm call, I could never be certain of what time I would return. So many times while tending the original call, the pager would go off. And in those days, we just had a pager, a one-way pager. So we had an answering service that could send me a message. I could get the message. She wouldn't know if I got it or not. I had no phone to respond. The pager's a one-way deal. So that was our communication. You wonder how we functioned, but we did. Not always great, but we did. So many times me a message. Instead of returning my pager, it would go off, giving me my message. Instead of returning to the clinic upon completing the mission at Farm A, then I was now requested to tend to a problem at Farm B. It happened on multiple occasions. Now, this particular day in this story, I got caught out in the country in springtime of the year by a real freak heavy, wet spring snowstorm. I finished up testing some bulls, and the farm wife had come out and informed me that I had to do post-mortem, what we call a necropsy, or would be the equivalent of autopsy with humans, in a cow that was in a pasture. And I knew the gentleman and how to get there. He wasn't going to be around, but I knew how to get there. So here we go. Now, although I had the tools and the supplies I needed to conduct a field necropsy along with me in the truck, the one thing I didn't have along, negligence on my part really, was a waterproof calving or post-mortem suit of any kind. And you can imagine when you're doing an autopsy or post-mortem on a cow, 1,400 pounds or whatever, by the time you open them up, you're kind of in there, like you can't really not get a little bit dirty. Anyways, oh well, at least I had the full-length plastic sleeves and latex gloves. That was the bare minimum that I required. As I was loading my truck to leave the bull testing completed, dark gray clouds had now seemed to appear from nowhere. The sun was now obscured and late spring temperature started to drop. Some 10 minutes later, as I arrived at the pasture to perform the cow post-mortem, lots of big wet snowflakes were starting to fall. By the time I found the dead cow, it was snowing hard. The weather was less than inviting, but I was there and the cow was there. So I thought to myself, just get at it and get the job done. So that's what I did. Now, I was concerned about getting a little blood and body fluids on me, not having a protective suit to wear. That concern quickly left me as the heavily falling snow first soaked my outer coveralls, then my underlying thin cotton surgical scrubs, and then my panties. My teeth were chattering and I was literally soaked to the bone after the 20 minutes it took me to complete the post-mortem and collect the tissues that I needed for lab submission from this cow. I couldn't pack up and get back to my truck quick enough. Looking like and feeling like a half-frozen drowned rat, what was I going to do now? I couldn't just climb onto my leather bucket seats being soaked like I was. I was going to have to strip down, take off my coveralls and scrubs and underwear, put one or two of my dry towels over my driver's seat and crawl on. And that's exactly what I did, as quickly as I could. Remember, it's snowing hard, big snow, wet flakes. Standing beside my truck out in the middle of the snowy bald prairie, blowing in the wind. But as I reached for my underwear to peel them off, I stopped. No, I thought to myself, my boys and I were just going to have to chill till I got back to the clinic. I recall growing up as a young lad, my mother often telling me whenever I was leaving for a short trip or even a night out to be sure I had clean underwear on, or just in case I got into an accident. How clean underwear would make a difference, I don't know. Anyway, I would have gladly worn the dirtiest pair I ever owned, that had they at least been dry instead of the cold, saturated ones adhering to me and hugging me like a second skin. Late that afternoon for the half-hour drive home, I left them on. After all, if I had happened to get into an accident or even just hit the ditch, and I was found to be completely naked at the wheel, can you imagine the rumors and stories that would have circulated around? Probably not one of them would have been accurate, telling the real reason I was driving around the country naked. As soon as I was comfortably seated in my truck, now shivering somewhat uncontrollably, I fired up the engine, set the heater on high. Being a human humidifier, all the windows instantly fogged over. I waited for the defrost to clear the windshield enough for me to see to drive out of the pasture. Dang it, I realized as I approached the fence gate that I had opened to enter the pasture, then so diligently closed behind me, because that's cowboy rules. You open the gate, you close the gate. I did that going in. This was going to be the first and only time in my life I'd be opening and closing such a gate, half naked, wearing nothing but my wet underwear. Of course, getting in and out of the truck twice to accomplish this feat, as the heavy wet snow continued to fall, now ensured my body got another 2 short, ice-cold snow showers. At that point, I wondered why on earth I ever signed up for this job. There had to be a lot drier and warmer ways to make a living than this. Just for full disclosure, I did add a little color to this part of the story. I had to make sure you were all feeling sorry for me at this point. The heater temperature was set on high, as was the fan speed, all the way back home to the clinic. Driving through Weyburn, population 10,000 plus, topless in a spring snowstorm was just a bit embarrassing. Finally pulling up and parking along the side of the clinic, which was still open and still staffed, I found myself now in a real dilemma. No phone in the truck, remember, no way to communicate. I began pondering what would be the safest, quickest, and least startling entrance strategy for a near naked owner, the head veterinarian, to re-enter his clinic. You want the cookie? You buy the cookie. And I'll give you one more here, maybe if I can. We're doing okay for time. Yeah. Now, Mr. B called the clinic. He was when Mr. B called the clinic, he was already convinced he knew his horse's problem. And that's not unusual. And now with Google, it's even tougher. And I feel bad for my colleague that's coming up to going to graduate, because Google is sometimes your best friend, but sometimes your best enemy, or worst enemy too. Say, he said to our receptionist, I have a middle-aged gelding out here that can't pass his water, meaning pee, of course. I wonder if the vet could come out and give him something to get him peeing again. Well, after questioning the client about the clinical signs his gelding was exhibiting, I had quite a different diagnosis in my mind. And I drove to the farm half hour south of Weyburn. So the complaint was he had this horse that was laid out flat, and over the past 2 days, the horse wasn't really moving. He was just laid out flat. Couldn't get up, couldn't pee, is in pain. But didn't fit any of the signs of a horse that couldn't pee in my mind, of course. But anyways, that's where we were. I had to do the complete physical exam, the heart, the temperature, pulse, all this stuff, got sounds, etc., color. So he's growing quite impatient with me as I'm, the horse can't pee. Why waste all this time, eh? How are you going to make him pee? Finally, Mr. B asked at this point, trying to figure out why I was wasting so much time with all this other stuff I was doing. Well, it was now time to educate this poor guy, openly commit to my diagnosis, and clearly demonstrate to him why I was the veterinarian and he was in the oil business. Now, Mr. B, I started in, your horse is not obstructed. Your horse is suffering from what we call grass founder. We see these most often in the spring of the year when a horse unaccustomed to grazing through the winter months suddenly has free access to all the fresh green grass it wishes to eat. Better have a drink. I can't say wishes. Well, Mr. B looked at me like I had two heads. Not because he thought I was twice as smart as the average man. It was more a look of, Doc, do you know anything about horses? I hate to tell you this, Doc, he responded, this horse has lived on green grass and hay all its life. Eats green grass every spring, and there's never been a problem. Well, maybe that's true, I thought to myself subconsciously, and maybe not. Mr. B was not buying what I was selling. I'm telling you, he continued, I know this horse, and I'm sure he can't pee. If you can make him pee, I'm sure he'll be fine. We have to get this horse to stand up, I said. I knew that would clearly demonstrate and instantly prove my diagnosis. I walked up and gave the horse a big swat on the rear quarters. He flinched a bit, but made no meaningful attempt to rise. I repeated my action, swatting him on the side, then the neck, then the rear quarters again. No response. Now what? Okay, I said, if he can't pee and his bladder hasn't yet burst, I'll easily be able to feel a large, tightly distended, volleyball-sized urinary bladder internally. Mr. B seemed quite pleased. Finally, I was on the right track. He was positive I was about to prove him right. Well, I donned a full-length thin plastic obstetrical sleeve on my right arm, lubricated it up well with a commercial veterinary lubricant. As I lay down on my right side, directly behind the two rather menacing-looking, powerful back legs of this horse, I was reminded of one of the reasons equine medicine and surgery never completely won over my love. At times, it could prove dangerous. Then, as I grabbed and lifted the horse's muscular tail out of the way with my left hand, I cupped my fingers together on my right hand and I thrust my hand through a rather tightly puckered, unwelcoming anus, shoving my right arm deep into the rectum. Deep enough to be able to reach and feel this horse's bladder. Now visualize, if you would, the rather precarious position I was lying in at that moment. Next, visualize what things would look like if less than 5 seconds later, this 1,100-pound beast was in full standing position, which it was. Fortunately for me, when a horse stands up, it first always rolls upright, then extends its front feet out in front of itself, then finally thrusts itself up using those powerful back legs into a full standing position. To this day, I don't know if that horse followed the textbook when it essentially shot up into the standing position. Once he felt for the very first time in his life a big right arm being driven at high speed up his poop chute, standing up at attention immediately ascended to the top of this horse's priority list of things to do today. You want the cookie? You'll buy the cookie. I think in the interest of time, that's enough bad reading for you. Most of you will read much better than I will. And I'll certainly hang around. We'll see if we have some comments and questions first. And I just want to close with something that I closed the first book with, I guess, because it means quite a bit to me. If I can find it. Now, I was fortunate enough to have had the most dedicated veterinary college to work with me and for me, plus various competent, compassionate, and dedicated technologists who complemented and fully supported all our veterinary activities and front office personnel that few clinics could ever match. And I think that's the key in any business, just get good people around you, and life is a lot simpler. Another blessing was simply the opportunity and the responsibility to serve his amazing animal kingdom, which I'll remain in awe of until the day I die. But all the thousands of animals I've had the opportunity to diagnose and treat, the odd one even successfully, pales miserably in comparison with the joy, happiness, entertainment, and life-stimulating experiences and stories my many wonderful clients unknowingly provided and shared with me over the past years. No book could ever capture the gratitude I owe all God's creatures, big and small, and all my wonderful clientele, short and tall. I thank you very much, and yeah, we're not going anywhere for a little bit, so we'll be here. And if we have any questions or comments, we'll welcome those. And I'll remain at the front if anybody cares to purchase a book or wants it signed or personalized. That's what we do. You want the cookie, you'll buy the cookie. Any questions? Any brave folks out there have a question? I know you probably say, how in the heck did you get to be a veterinarian? I wonder sometimes, but anyways. I did in the second book write a little bit of a chapter of would I do it again? You want the cookie, you buy the cookie.
I think you did have a question right over there.
Question, yes.
Who gave you the title for the books? And I'm sure you've had that question before.
That's a great question. And I thought writing the book would be the challenge. I know the challenge was the cover, I think, and the title. And Dina was looking after most of that. So she'd say, okay, now we need a title for this thing. I'd say, okay, get me some titles, she said. So I'd figure out like 15 titles, put them in the email, send them to her. No. I put down as far a couple of them that I thought were good, No, give me 15 more. Go back to the drawing board, 15 more. And of course, which is good because, I might be a little bit of a smart aleck or think to play on words and this and that. And I had some I thought were pretty good. And I had one I really liked, and I think it's on the back of this. We never did use it for a title. Yeah, okay. Some bite, some lick, some fight, some kick. That's all that. I like it. Not catchy enough. So just like we had the picture with me of my arm up the cow, she said, we need something catchy. So I did send, there was about another 15, and don't the kick when you do that was in there. I like that, she said, that kick thing, they're not going to remember your name. They'll remember a vet wrote a book, something about getting kicked. She said, that's how they'll find your book. So she said, why don't we use that one? Don't get kicked when you do that. And if you want to watch me walk out of here tonight, you won't have to buy the cookie. You'll know if you kick or not. Good question. Thank you for that. Yes, Brenda.
I know that the Harry Potter books were rejected by many publishers. Did you have trouble getting a publisher? Like, did you submit this to lots of places or?
I'm as naive as they come as an amateur writer. And I guess in the interest of time, I still subscribe to the fact that September to Christmas time is a time that books like this will sell. I mean, they do sell at other times, but those are the hot months. And we were running through to get into June, July, and August, whatever. But when it came time when I had the manuscript done, the answer to that is no, I didn't. I looked at some websites. I talked to some people that have done books, and basically they cautioned me a little bit because they said that a lot of companies will publish your book. They'll take your manuscript and they'll publish your book, but you're not going to get any help from them, and they'll take your money and you're kind of on your own. So Dina Driver, I think it's your Nicholsworth also is in Regina. That gal I contacted, and she said she'd love to do my book, but the earliest she could touch it was the end of October that year. And I said, cool, I'd sure like to have it out by then. She said, why don't you contact Dina Driver? She's got a reputation for doing Saskatchewan stories, true stories. She has done some fiction as well, but her love or her preference seems to be nonfiction. And she's just done the Crash book on the Reg Crash Harrison, excellent book. 101 years old now, I think Reg is. He was here last weekend, I believe it was, with Dina. So yeah, no, I investigated it on the internet only, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna bite the bullet. I wasn't in it to make money. That was the first question Dina asked me, why are you writing a book? And I said, you know, I just got these stories. I want to share them. I think somebody, especially my clients, will enjoy them. Kind of just a thank you to my clients too, because when book one did come out, a lot of them after, they said, I haven't read a book since like school, but I didn't have one. And I know everybody in there. And I would say, yeah, you do, eh? And they don't, because there's some names in there I made up, but they still claim they did. So the answer to that is no. I just went with somebody that had lots of experience, I guess. You pay one way or the other. So it's been good. The Dean has certainly got a name out there. So DriverWorks Inc. looked after me, obviously good enough that she looked after me again this time. Yeah. Yes, Rick.
Yeah, you have dedicated this to your folks, and I'm wondering whether your folks or what influence they may have had on your vet decision.
Well, I think, like I say, we always had a few animals around the acreage, if you will, mini mixed farm. So I think that maybe is where I got a little bit of interest in the cattle part of it. Chickens, take it or leave it. Our poultry livestock. By the cookie. Okay. So I think that's maybe where I first got to start this with the cattle part of it. And of course, we always had what goes along with that. My folks were, as you know, very conservative type people that never pushed me one way or the other. I was pushing myself towards this hockey career and kind of had tunnel vision there, I think. But no, I think that was the thing. My uncles were also mixed farmers, the Hoium family. Just all my uncles mixed farm, and of course we did everything from haying to picking rocks to whatever, and dealt with cattle. Horses were never my forte, as I think you found out there. You don't diagnose grass founder by brake checking or whatever, running your arm up a horse's arse. But I had to get this guy. To prove to this guy, or at least try to prove to this guy that I'm right, he's wrong. So no, not other than that. And I had so many great uncles and aunts, and yourself included. I've told you that before, Rick, that, you're not out there to be mentors, but they were mentors. They were good people. They had good jobs. And so I guess that maybe got me interested in the animal. And I've always had a little bit of an interest in animals, whether it's snare and gophers, and I've been real good at killing things, so that made another qualification. But anyways, that's kind of how that came to be. Yes.
When I was reading your first book, and you were saying where you were going, and I was trying to imagine whose farm or land that you were going to. And I'm sure people that you were at were happy to be included in your book. Were there any unhappy people?
I own a saying that, when I was going to farmers' places, and the book came out, a lot of farmers probably were, wondering if that call would be in the book. And if so, were they happy, or if not, were they unhappy? And that's again an excellent question, and I wrote that with kind of that in mind, because I had some very special clientele. It's hard to find the salt of the earth, these farm people in my mind. And my deal was, we were full of them, as most little towns are. And so I had people that said, "Wow, I know exactly when that happened, but it's not quite right, Doc. What happened?" I said, No. This is my book. It's from my memory, and then that's the way it's coming out. I don't need to have your story. You want to tell your story, you write your book. And so I profess that it's accurate, but maybe there are some discrepancies in there. And I had people come in and say, well, why didn't you put that one in there? I've had a couple of guys still, I think they're gonna buy book 2 because they're sure they'll be in there. But if you look at this picture close, like I said at the start, okay, that's me lubricated up with my arm up the cow's, whatever, south end. We're out in, I won't say hostile, we're out in cowboy country. And the stories and the jokes and the language certainly fall short of the glory of God. And some stories you cannot put in a book and, make it presentable for public consumption. So a couple of those individuals that are still, they're going to be buying this book thinking, oh, you got to be in that one. I didn't get the first one. I hate to disappoint them. Yeah. Any more questions or comments? Yes, Rick. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Don't apologize. We're here till what time are we here? 9?
Till 8.
Well, it's just that in the first book,
Yes.
the story of the bull that got loose in town and ended up in the neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
That is a rodeo. And I thought that was the greatest. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and that's, I didn't make anything up on that story at all. And I literally was, I didn't think I had enough liability insurance that day because that bull was he was on the run, blonde Aquitaine bull, couple, 2-3 years old, mature bull, wild bull. And it wasn't my fault. My fight corrals were 6 feet high, but he went up and over them. And then what are you gonna do with that? Here, kitty, they don't answer. And he had to go right down this quiet crescent, get in the backyard of people we knew. Elma, Spencer was her name, and when she came home for lunch, all the kids were on the street because they're coming out of public school, the comprehensive school, it's noon hour. And there were kids on that crescent, little kids, of course, all the police car, they're gonna come and see, So when the police come, I said, get these kids off the street. I was pretty well, I was sure that I was done that day. I thought this bull comes out from behind that house. He's not gonna respect nobody or nothing. And thank goodness he stayed and fertilized her lawn for about 15-20 minutes, maybe longer than that, I guess, because we had to get cowboys in from the country to get him. And did we get him? I don't know. By yes.
Gary, what is the most unique, if you could use that word, animal that you ever had to diagnose, like a monkey or an alligator or something like that?
Well, I had a couple clients. I never did get them figured out. What was the most unique? Oh boy. We didn't do a lot of variety because I didn't, you get your head so packed full of stuff when you leave college, you could write about anything, but then you don't use it for a few months and you don't use it, you lose it. And what was I thinking of when you were asking that? There was one thing I was going to say. I know I looked at a Lipizan stallion one time with a little bit of fear because I don't know what those horses are worth. And if you're going to do anything intravenous on a horse or a Lipizan stallion, you better not screw up because I'm pretty sure they're worth a lot of money. I think probably, I don't know if it's unique or not, but we dealt with some animals of value. And I remember one distinctly that the hunters and dog trainers would come up from Alabama all the time. I'm sure you remember them. And they were pretty good clients because dogs didn't seem to figure out the difference between a pheasant and a porcupine. So we would see quite a few of them. But one particular dog came in and was quite a enigma. I wasn't 100% sure what was going on. We ended up diagnosing a pretty serious anemia, low red blood cell count in this dog. Not familiar with what goes on in Alabama and all those hotter climates and the parasite loads and whatever. I finally was able, with the help of the college, to figure out that we had a blood parasite in this dog. And I was never so happy in my life when he said, Doc, if you're not sure what you're doing, we'll put them on the plane flying back to the University of Alabama. I said, that's exactly what you should do. So we did. he got that dog, they drove to Williston, flew it down to back to Alabama or wherever, and they treated the dog, they treated those before. And so that's maybe being a little bit of a coward, but maybe a lot of a coward, but sometimes, you best not get yourself in too deep, so that's kind of where we left that one. I once had I didn't treat reptiles. Snakes, I absolutely detest snakes. If somebody comes around that corner with a snake right now, I'm out of here. But a lady came in one day. Our clinic was located right by Highway 13. And very well-dressed lady. She come in one day like this. So can you help this turtle? And I looked at the turtle. And I don't treat reptiles, but I said, yeah, I can help that turtle. She said, I ran right over it. She said, I was tried them as I ran right over it. I said, oh, I can help that turtle. Thank you. Thank you. She said, I'll pay whatever it costs. And out she goes. Well, the turtle was leaking out every hole. I mean, it was the only successful reptile I ever treated because I sent him off to the nice green grass across the Turtle Lake there pretty quickly. But anyways, that was one of the few reptiles I had to deal with. And literally, I would not have dealt with a snake. In fact, there's a story in the book 1 about that, and might even be in book 2 again because I couldn't get it out of my head. Yeah. I never had any real exotic things, Bob, like monkeys or we used to deal with eagles and some of those, birds like that, parrots. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, is it the claws I'm worried about or is it that beak, and then they sit on you and crack a walnut with their beak. Well, then you figure it out. Yeah, that's that beak. We don't want that beak. So, and probably the most fractious, most dangerous animal we dealt with, the most, that real nice little kitty, we had a few squabbles with cats. And book 2, there's a story in there about the special person we had in our clinic that we used for those cats. You have to try to be humane too, you can't you can only do so much to fish them out of a kennel. And then try to, they really like when you put them in a bag, stretch them up and then try to stick needles in their jugular vein. They love that. Yeah, especially when they're already mad. But anyways, cats are, they can be, if we'd had as many cats in our clinic as dogs, I probably would have quit practice already. Right? Anyways, anything else? It's been a wonderful audience. I'm so glad that so many of you were able to make it out. You weren't all paid customers. I paid some of you to come, but not all of you. And met some nice people here tonight. Hope you enjoyed the juice. It wasn't presented very well. We don't get a lot of rehearsal at this, but anyways, I thank you, Alyssa, for the opportunity to come and share a little bit about these books. We'll be around here as long as you want us around here and until they kick us out. So if you just want to chat or you got questions or comments, feel free. We'll be up here. Thank you. Maybe if I can just add one thing, I did talk